All right, let's talk about this episode of Family Guy, Season 22, Episode 2. You know, sometimes you watch an episode and you think, did Seth MacFarlane just wake up one day and decide to make a weirdly specific commentary on open-plan offices and the true crime podcast craze? All while Peter becomes a grocery store employee and Brian tries to write a book? And then you look at the director credits and it all makes a little more sense. Or maybe it doesn't. With this show, who knows? But the fact is, while the rest of the world was dealing with, I don't know, actual news and stuff, the Family Guy crew was busy churning out, well, this. And if there's one thing this episode proves, it's that the writers are definitely exploring the outer limits of what we're willing to watch. Seriously, the weirdest twist, you might think it's Peter getting a job at the grocery store or Brian actually talking to a victim's family. But stick around, because the true chaos, it's coming for your wallet. And it involves something way more mundane than you'd expect. You are not going to believe where this goes. And hey, if you're digging these deep dives into the questionable brilliance of Family Guy, you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button, hit it hard. You don't want to miss the next time we dissect whatever madness they cook up next. It's for the culture, really. So this episode, Season 22, Episode 2, dives headfirst into a couple of pretty distinct storylines. On one hand, you've got the Brewery guys, including Peter, dealing with the announcement of a major office renovation. They're going full open floor plan, complete with all the buzzwords like synergy and experiential bandwidth. It's basically a corporate makeover that nobody asked for, leading to confusion and the brewery being shut down for 2 months. Meanwhile, Brian, ever the aspiring intellectual, is struggling with writer's block. He's desperate for inspiration for his next novel, and he stumbles upon the incredibly dark and potentially profitable world of true crime. He decides to team up with Detective Peter for this newfound passion, which, as you can imagine, leads to some interesting investigative techniques. The episode attempts to weave these threads together, showing how everyday life, work woes, and even morbid curiosity can intersect. It's less about a single tight plot and more about exploring these separate, albeit connected, anxieties. Does it nail it? Not entirely. There are moments where the stories feel like they're just orbiting each other rather than truly merging. The writing for this one felt a bit scattered, honestly. Like they had a few good ideas that they weren't sure how to fully integrate into one cohesive narrative. The jokes were hit or miss, with some landing perfectly and others just falling flat. Visually, it was pretty standard Family Guy fare. Nothing that really jumped out and screamed cinematic masterpiece. But the pacing, especially in the second half, felt a little rushed as they tried to wrap everything up. My personal verdict? This episode is a solid, if not spectacular, entry. It's got its moments, but it definitely leaves you thinking about what could have been. It's not the worst episode, not by a long shot, but it's not exactly a season highlight either. It sits comfortably in the fine, I guess, category for me. We'll get into the specifics of why it lands where it does, but for now, just know it's an episode that tries a lot of things and lands on a few of them. Let's break down some of the absolute standout moments, or perhaps more accurately, the moments that made me stare at the screen and question reality for a second. First up, the entire brewery announcement. Preston, their boss, comes in with this smarmy, WeWork-esque energy, talking about experiential bandwidth and synergy. He's got this vibe of a guy who just discovered a thesaurus and decided to use every single word. And the ideas themselves? Hammock desks, scooter desks, and the legendary desk. A desk that's a desk? Revolutionary. It's like he's trying to make working feel like a college dorm party, but with more corporate jargon and probably less actual work getting done. The reveal that the brewery is closing for 2 months for construction? That's the real kicker. The employees are just standing there, jaws on the floor, realizing their income is about to go poof, all for some god-awful futuristic office. It's a perfect parody of modern office trends, and it lands because it feels so painfully close to what actually happens in real companies. You can just picture some CEO reading a trend report and thinking, yes, hammock desks, that's the key to our next $1 billion. What this moment is really saying is that corporate America is often out of touch and willing to throw money at the latest fad without considering the actual human cost. It's a satire of the superficiality of modern work culture, where innovation often means making things more inconvenient for the people actually doing the work. Personally, I found it hilarious. I'd love to see Peter try to work on a hammock desk.
The sheer physical comedy potential is off the charts. If I were writing it, maybe Preston would have also announced a mandatory team-building retreat where everyone had to communicate solely through interpretive dance, just to push the absurdity even further. But as it is, it's a strong start to the workplace chaos. Then there's Brian's whole writing process and his newfound interest in true crime. He's sitting there with a rosé, complaining about his muse, when he gets this brilliant idea from Peter. Peter starts telling this story about a guy who died on his birthday and got an ice cream cake. You know, the kind where the ice cream is the cake? And Brian immediately dismisses it as too complicated and boring. Harsh, Brian, really harsh. But that's Brian for you, always looking down his nose at anything that doesn't fit his lofty artistic ideals. This moment is classic Brian. He wants to be seen as the sophisticated artist, but he's so out of touch with what people actually find interesting. He's chasing literary glory, while the real world, with its bizarre ice cream cakes and birthday deaths, is right in front of him. He's so desperate for an idea that he completely overlooks the potential in Peter's utterly mundane, yet strangely tragic anecdote. What I would change? I'd have Brian actually try to write about the ice cream cake story. Let him struggle with it for a bit, show his pretentious attempts to elevate it into something profound, only to fail miserably. That would be funnier than him just dismissing it outright. My personal reaction? I was annoyed at Brian. Seriously, dude, a guy died on his birthday with an ice cream cake is gold. What does he want, a Shakespearean tragedy written on a gluten-free cracker? And speaking of Peter's storytelling, the batteries to Pat Sajak anecdote is a masterpiece of misdirection and accidental genius. Peter tries to tell a story about a guy dying on his birthday, and it's a mess. Then he pivots to this story about his Amazon guy delivering batteries to Pat Sajak. The logic is insane. Batteries have warning labels, so the delivery guy knew. Brian points out it could have been anything with a battery, but Peter insists he shook it. It's so stupid it loops back around to being brilliant. It's the epitome of Peter's flawed logic and how he can somehow stumble into the right answer through sheer idiocy. This is the kind of surreal, nonsensical humor that Family Guy does so well.
It's not about the setup and punchline. It's about the sheer, unadulterated stupidity of the premise. What this moment reveals is the contrast between Brian's intellectual pretensions and Peter's grounded, albeit often incorrect, reality. Peter's story, for all its nonsensical details, has a tangible, bizarre truth to it. Brian's literary ambitions feel increasingly hollow in comparison. I would have leaned even harder into the shaking part. Like, Peter describes this elaborate ritual of shaking the box, listening for a faint rattle, and then a divine revelation telling him, it's batteries for Pat Sajak. Just pure, unhinged Peter. My reaction was pure delight. I love when Peter's logic is so warped it becomes brilliant. The introduction of the vegan lady chef, pinball machines, and nursing pods at the brewery is peak corporate satire. They're trying so hard to be hip and forward-thinking that they've created this bizarre utopia of workplace perks that feel more like a daycare for adults. The nursing pods in particular are ripe for confusion. When Griffin asks if they're for anyone, it opens up this hilarious can of worms. And then the joke about ordering a Cornish game hen and only getting a wing? It's a sly jab at the often ridiculous micro-portioning of trendy vegan food. Oh, you want a whole chicken? Sorry, we only serve ethically sourced single feathers here. This whole sequence is Family Guy at its most observational. It's poking fun at the cliches of modern office culture, where companies try to buy employee happiness with superficial perks instead of, fair wages and reasonable hours. The nursing pods are particularly funny because of the inherent awkwardness and the quick jump to a hypothetical of someone wanting a whole hen. It's a visual gag that speaks volumes about the performative nature of these office upgrades. My personal take? These are the kinds of details that make you appreciate the writers paying attention to the absurdities of real life. I wouldn't change a thing here. It's spot on. Then we get to the true crime writing session with Brian and Joe. Joe, bless his heart, is just trying to be helpful, offering up case files. And Brian is just Brian. He's completely detached, treating actual murder victims like plot devices. Joe mentions the murdered women, half of them named Brittany, half of them named Lacey, and Brian's takeaway is, don't name them that. It's so callous, so self-absorbed. He's completely missing the human tragedy and focusing on marketability.
The line about true crime is huge right now. You could be sitting on a gold mine is chillingly accurate. This is the dark side of Brian. He's not a bad person at heart, but his artistic ambition can make him incredibly self-centered and dismissive of real pain. This is where the episode really starts to explore the ethics of creating art from tragedy. What's the line between telling important stories and exploiting suffering for personal gain? Brian is clearly crossing it, and Joe, despite his job, is enabling him. I would have made Joe slightly more conflicted. Maybe he expresses a bit more unease about Brian's approach, even as he's providing the details. It would add another layer to their dynamic. My reaction was a mix of fascination and disgust. It's a perfect encapsulation of how the media often capitalizes on real-life horror. The grocery store sequence with Peter is a wild ride. He gets a job there during the brewery renovations and immediately turns it into a chaotic playground. He's behind the fish counter, he's messing with customers, he's telling them mussels are $34 a month at Bally's. It's pure Peter being Peter, but amplified by the new environment. The moment where he disappears into the produce mist and Lois is left calling for him, only for him to respond with, "There was never Peter, only loose carrots," is deeply unsettling and hilarious. It's a glimpse into Peter's fractured reality and his ability to completely detach from his surroundings. This part of the episode highlights how Peter, despite his flaws, can find a strange kind of joy and purpose in the most unexpected places, even if that purpose involves confusing elderly women about produce and making up his own surreal dialogue. It's also a good way to show Lois's exasperation with his antics, a dynamic that's always been a core part of the show. If I were writing it, I'd have Peter actually achieve some bizarre level of success in the grocery store, becoming some kind of legendary, albeit insane employee. Maybe he starts a whole new philosophy of grocery shopping. My reaction to this scene was pure, unadulterated laughter. It's classic Peter chaos, and it's always gold. And then we have the whole cold case investigation for the true crime novel. Brian and Joe are trying to solve a murder that's been unsolved for years. Joe is trying to apply police logic, while Brian is just looking for narrative arcs and marketable plot points. When they ask the victim's parents if one of them did it, it's absolutely brutal. The parents' reaction, the sheer disbelief and pain is captured really well. And Brian's justification, "We just need to know who did it, and between us, it'd be great if one of you did." That's the depth of his self-absorption. He's not looking for justice, he's looking for a tidy ending for his book. This is the episode's most direct confrontation with the ethics of true crime. It's showing the real-life consequences of turning someone's tragedy into entertainment. The fact that they're considering fictionalizing details, like changing the victim's name and location to make them more relatable, is a sharp critique of the genre. My personal opinion, this is the strongest part of the episode's social commentary. It's uncomfortable, it's dark, but it's necessary. If I were writing it, I'd have Joe at some point actually push back on Brian more forcefully. Maybe he has a moment of realizing that this isn't just a story. But alas, that's not the Family Guy way. Finally, the moment where Brian finds the key to the storage unit is a great little twist that ties Joe's personal life into the investigation. Bonnie's role-play thing with Joe, where she locks him in a storage unit while guys come over, is just wow. It's a glimpse into their deeply kinky and possibly disturbing marital dynamic. Joe's defense, "I play the role of a sexy armoire waiting in another room," is a perfect example of Family Guy's ability to take a bizarre premise and make it sound utterly mundane. It's so over the top, but delivered with such a straight face. This moment serves a few purposes. It advances the plot by giving them a potential lead, but it also provides a comedic insight into Joe's often unspoken personal life. It's a reminder that even our seemingly normal characters have these hidden, wild depths. It's also a funny way to subvert expectations about Joe as a character. We see him as the lovable, if somewhat bumbling cop, but then we get this glimpse of his very specific, very strange marital activities. My reaction? A mixture of shock and morbid fascination. It's the kind of joke that makes you simultaneously laugh and wonder about the show's writers. I would have loved to see a quick visual gag of Joe dressed as a sexy armoire, just to seal the deal on the absurdity. This episode really dives deep into the bizarre and the mundane, and this moment is peak example of that. Now, about subscribing. Look, I know you're probably still reeling from the idea of nursing pods and Joe's storage unit roleplay, but if you want to keep up with this kind of deep dive, you gotta hit that subscribe button.
We're not just watching these episodes, we're dissecting them, finding the genius, and sometimes just marveling at the sheer audacity.
Consider it your personal entry fee into the weird world of Family Guy analysis. You wouldn't want to miss the next one, would you? It's probably going to involve more questionable life choices and office renovations. Added chaos of him becoming a grocery store employee. He's at his peak Peterness when he's completely oblivious to the trouble he's causing, especially at the grocery store. His nonsensical explanations and his general disregard for any kind of order are on full display. When he's behind the fish counter and telling people mussels are $34 a month at Bally's, that's peak Peter. It's like he was born to confuse and mildly inconvenience people. His role in the brewery storyline is more reactive, the typical Thai just wanting his paycheck. But his grocery store antics are where he truly shines in this episode. What does it say about him? It confirms that no matter the situation, Peter will always find a way to be Peter, usually in the most disruptive way possible. It's a testament to his character that he can be so consistently foolish and yet somehow still be the center of the show. His best moment is definitely the produce mist disappearance. It's surreal and perfectly embodies his detached nature. Brian, on the other hand, is trying to be something he's not, which is a serious, acclaimed novelist. His struggle with writer's block and his descent into the dark world of true crime are the main drivers of his storyline. He's at his worst when he's treating murder victims like plot points, asking their parents if one of them did it. That's a low point, even for Brian. He wants the gravitas of a literary artist, but lacks the empathy required to handle real tragedy. His most interesting moment, ironically, is when he's being told he's a bad storyteller by Peter regarding the ice cream cake story. It's a moment of genuine self-awareness that he quickly dismisses. This episode really pushes the idea that Brian's ambition sometimes outweighs his talent and his ethics. His role here suggests the show is willing to explore the darker, more exploitative side of creative pursuits. Lois is mostly the voice of reason, the one reacting to Peter's chaos and trying to keep things together. She's exasperated by Peter's new job at the grocery store, and her interactions with him there are classic Lois. Her quiet suffering as Peter disrupts her world is a familiar, albeit sometimes frustrating part of her character. She doesn't get a huge storyline of her own, but she's essential as the anchor to Peter's madness. Her best moment is probably her frantic calls for Peter in the grocery store, followed by his surreal response. It highlights her constant struggle to manage her family. This episode doesn't necessarily change how I see Lois, but it reinforces her role as the long-suffering wife, a character who often has to clean up the messes her family makes. Joe, bless his heart, is trying to be a professional detective, but he keeps getting dragged into Brian's ethically dubious writing project. His most compelling moment is probably the revelation of his and Bonnie's storage unit roleplay. It's so unexpected and bizarre that it's almost brilliant. It adds this layer of complexity to his character that we don't often see, even though it's played purely for shock value and laughs. He's decent as the investigator, providing the technical details, but he's more interesting when he's navigating Brian's ethical compromises and when his own personal life gets hilariously exposed. His role here is to be the conduit for Brian's dark ambition and to have his own weirdness revealed along the way. And then there's Preston, the brewery boss. He's a caricature of a modern tech bro CEO, all buzzwords and nonsensical corporate initiatives. He's not a deep character, but he serves his purpose perfectly as the catalyst for the brewery storyline. His enthusiasm for synergy and experiential bandwidth is hilariously over the top. He's a symbol of everything that's wrong with trying too hard to be innovative in the workplace. He's essentially a plot device to create chaos, and he does a great job of that. His best moment is any time he opens his mouth and spouts more corporate nonsense. Now, let's dig into the hidden gems and Easter eggs that you probably zipped right past while laughing or being utterly bewildered. First, the intro song. While it's a staple, the fact that it's still going strong after all these seasons with that same earnest delivery of "Lucky There's a Family Guy" is a subtle commentary in itself. It's the show acknowledging its own legacy, almost a meta-commentary on its longevity and unchanging nature. It's a wink to the audience like, yeah, we're still here doing the same thing, and you love it. It's so ingrained that we barely notice it, but it's a constant presence, a sonic anchor to the show's identity. It's not a new gag, but its continued presence is a subtle nod to the show's enduring and sometimes baffling appeal. Secondly, when Preston is talking about the confusingly charismatic WeWork lunatic, this is a direct jab at Adam Neumann, the former CEO of WeWork. Neumann was notorious for his outlandish behavior, his cult-like leadership style, and his grand pronouncements about changing the world through co-working spaces. The confusingly charismatic part is key. He had this undeniable magnetism that allowed him to pull off some truly insane business decisions. This isn't just a random CEO, it's a very specific, very public figure the writers are targeting. It shows the writers are paying attention to real-world business personalities and their eccentricities, and they're not afraid to poke fun at them. It adds a layer of topical humor that might go over some viewers' heads if they're not familiar with the WeWork saga. Third, the desk concept. This is a prime example of Family Guy taking a simple idea, a desk, and twisting it into absurd meta-humor. A desk that functions as a working desk is, by definition, just a desk. The joke is in the redundancy, the unnecessary naming of something so basic as if it's a groundbreaking innovation. It's a commentary on how companies often rebrand or repackage old ideas as new and revolutionary to generate buzz, especially in the tech and startup world. It's a subtle, smart dig at marketing buzzwords and the tendency to overcomplicate simple things. It's the kind of joke that rewards attentive viewing, a little nugget of absurdity that might make you laugh out loud if you catch the underlying silliness. Fourth, Joe's explanation of his and Bonnie's roleplay. He says, "Yeah, it's pretty kinky. I play the role of a sexy armoire waiting in another room." The humor here comes from the juxtaposition of Joe, the somewhat gruff police detective, with this incredibly specific and bizarre role. The word armoire itself is a bit old-fashioned and formal, making the sexy armoire even more ridiculous. It's the kind of deeply personal, highly specific detail that you wouldn't expect to hear from Joe, and that's what makes it funny. It's a callback to the show's tendency to reveal the strange private lives of its characters, but it's delivered with such a deadpan seriousness that it becomes even funnier. You have to be listening closely to catch the full absurdity. Fifth, the TV show playing in the background, Curb Your Enthusiasm, where Jeff Garlin just repeats everything Larry says. This is a specific bit of meta-humor poking fun at the show's style, particularly the repetitive nature of some dialogue or comedic beats. Jeff Garlin's character in Curb is often characterized by his particular way of speaking and interacting with Larry David. By highlighting this specific dynamic, Family Guy is essentially saying, we see these comedic tropes, and we can make fun of them, even when they're happening on another acclaimed show. It's a bit of inside baseball for comedy fans, a reference that adds another layer to the show's self-awareness. It's a joke about jokes, and that's always a fun trick to pull off. Let's talk about some of the choices made in this episode and what could have been different. First, the whole idea of the brewery closing for 2 months for renovations. This is a solid setup for Peter's grocery store job, but it feels a little extreme. What if instead of a complete shutdown, it was a partial renovation, meaning Peter and the gang had to work around construction? That could lead to more immediate workplace hijinks within the brewery itself. Imagine Peter trying to operate a forklift while Bob 40 feet in the air on scaffolding, or trying to conduct a beer tasting with sawdust falling into the vats. My alternative here would be to keep the brewery open but in disarray. It would keep the core group together and allow for more direct interactions between them as they navigate the chaos. It might have also allowed for more jokes about the actual process of renovation, rather than just the consequence of being out of work. Second, Brian's true crime obsession. The idea of him wanting to write a true crime novel is inherently interesting, but the execution felt a bit too straightforward. What if instead of just asking the victim's family, Brian started to invent details before he even spoke to them? Like he'd present a fictionalized version of the crime to them as a way to jog their memory. Imagine Brian saying, "So we think the killer was a disgruntled ex-lover who wore a cape made of human hair. Does that ring a bell?" The parents' horror and confusion would be the punchline, and it would highlight Brian's insensitivity even more brutally. My alternative would be to have Brian actively create false leads or suspects in his fictional narrative, leading to real-world consequences, perhaps even making the actual police investigation more difficult, which would be a darker but potentially more compelling plot. Third, the ending with the storage unit key. It's a decent hook for a future episode or a continuation, but as a resolution for this episode, it felt a bit tacked on. What if the storage unit key led them to something completely unexpected and mundane? Like it contains all of Joe's old Beanie Baby collection, or a secret stash of Bonnie's taxidermy pets. The anticlimax could be the punchline, playing on the expectation that it would lead to a huge criminal discovery.
My alternative ending would be to have the storage unit key unlock a box of old brewery records that reveal Preston's entire business plan was based on a scam, thus making the renovation a way to hide evidence. It would tie the two storylines together more directly and give the brewery plot a more satisfying, albeit cynical, conclusion. It would also give Peter a reason to be outraged about something more tangible than just losing his paycheck. So let's talk about this episode, Family Guy Season 22, Episode 2. I'm giving it a 6.7 out of 10. That 0.7 is crucial because it represents those flashes of brilliance, those perfectly landed jokes, the moments where the satire truly bites. But the 0.6, that's the scattered plot, the jokes that don't quite land, the feeling that the episode was trying to do too much and not quite succeeding. Who is this episode for? It's for the die-hard fans who will dissect every single frame, every single callback. It's for people who appreciate dark humor and social satire, even when it's a bit clunky. It's probably not for the casual viewer who just wants a straightforward laugh riot. What would have pushed this score higher? A tighter narrative. If the brewery storyline and the true crime storyline had been more intertwined from the start, rather than feeling like two separate episodes stitched together, it would have been much stronger. Maybe if Peter's grocery store job had somehow directly intersected with Brian and Joe's investigation, or if the brewery renovations had been a direct result of a crime Preston was trying to cover up, that would have elevated it. It's like watching two good ideas that just never managed to hold hands. Ultimately, this episode is a reminder that even when Family Guy isn't firing on all cylinders, it can still be entertainingly absurd and thought-provoking. It's a show that keeps pushing boundaries, even if some of those pushes land a little awkwardly. And just like that confusingly charismatic WeWork lunatic Preston, the show keeps trying to reinvent itself, sometimes successfully, sometimes, well, with hammock desks and desk desks. We'll see where they go from here.